And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. This is our 97th episode, recorded on Wednesday, January 10th, 2024, and we are getting really close and counting down to our 100th episode. I am your host, Kathy Amos, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Jeff Marlow. And tonight we'll be breaking down your number 14 Indiana Hoosiers 67-75 win over the Penn State Nittany Lions. The Hoosiers have now won 13 in a row straight this season and 13 in a row straight home conference wins going back to last season. This win tonight brings their record to 14-1 and 5-0 in the Big Ten. So we're going to start our show like we do every show, and that's with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And for me, I think I'm going to take the obvious one, which is where we were right after the timeout in that third quarter. So around 6:30 mark, Terry Morin took a timeout. And right after that, Sid came in, she drives for two, and then we forced a turnover. Max comes down, misses a two, and Sid gets the offensive rebound. There's a lot of passing, and eventually Sydney drives it for two, and then Sarah Scalia on the other end steals it. A few minutes later, around the 4-minute mark, Lexi drives the ball, kicks it out to Sydney for three, finally hits one, which I felt was like a huge weight for the whole team. Then we go back on defense, steal by McKenzie, got back down on the other end, ball to Sydney. She drives, she's fouled, and makes two free throws where we finally recaptured the lead, 46-47. That was an 11-2 run for the Hoosiers and a 9-point run for Sydney by herself. In that quarter, we would end up finishing 19-6 to end that quarter, where we eventually took the lead and then maintained it the rest of the game. And I thought that was an important stretch for us because the first, 25 minutes of that game, we were really, really struggling. It looked like we were not really focused on defense. We weren't focused on offense. There was a lot of turnovers. We were missing rebounds. We weren't quite getting the steals, and it just looked like Penn State came out with a little bit more pep in their step. And, not surprising, this was sandwiched in between a big road win that we just had over Nebraska and going into a huge road win maybe I'm a little ahead of myself, a huge road game coming up against Iowa this Saturday. And, I think it's not surprising that the team came out just a little bit flat-footed and unfocused. But as we have seen from this team time and time again for the last few years, the seniority, the experience has really played out. And that whole stretch from that timeout, that whole 6.5-minute stretch to end that third quarter, I think was a perfect example of how this team plays together and is coached very well. And so for me, that entire 6.5 minute was our banner moment. And as usual, our banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, the presenting sponsor of Back Home Network, which includes Assembly Call and Crimson Cast. And we'll be talking a little bit more to you about Home Field Apparel when we talk about what's coming up with our 100th episode, but we'll get to that later in the program. But Homefield is releasing new schools or updating their products for schools in their existing line. So you're bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that loves great collegiate gear. Not only do you get great quality apparel, but you are supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelley School of Business. So go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23 for 15% off your entire first order. Again, that's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. And the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right, I'm going to hit a couple quick news headlines, and then we'll turn it over to Jeff for Marlow's musings. So we have a couple IU recruits, Faith Wiseman and Sydney Finn, who have been nominated for the McDonald's All-American Game. All around the country, Aubrey Griffin from UConn will now miss the rest of the season with an ACL tear. This is now the fourth Husky to be out for the season. And then it is also being reported that Paige Beckers of UConn may return for another season rather than declaring for the NBA draft next year. But Jeff, let's talk about today's game and Indiana's win. What are your musings for tonight?
Well, I want to go back to the news on Becker's a little bit, and Becker's is interesting because she's being projected as the 3rd overall pick in the draft, but she's very good friends with AZ Fudd, who is one of those 4 players who is out for the year for UConn, and together since they've been in stores, they've only played the stat I saw today, they've only played like 17 games together. So there's a lot of the speculation that she wants to come back and see what they can do next year, but again, will still have to remain to be seen. And Kathy, this is before I get into the music about tonight games. I had somebody asking me this earlier in the week, and we haven't had an announcement yet from her. But Chloe Moore McNeil that's a huge decision because Chloe still has a COVID year that she can use. Sydney's already announced she's coming back next year, but another year of Chloe would obviously help, kind of even more bridge that gap between some of the people who are leaving. And because Mac's out of eligibility, Sarah's out of eligibility, and such. So that would be interesting to see what Chloe does by the time we get to the end of the year. But about tonight's game, again, was it great? No. Was this the best this team can play? No. We've seen this over the last couple of games when they're shooting well. And let's face it, though, making shots makes everything look better.
And it makes just the game so much easier, doesn't it?
It does. It makes a hard game look really easy, and it makes playing hard look easy. But I did think there were times tonight in the first half, especially where I thought they got outworked. I thought, and I think you saw that even a little bit at the beginning of the third quarter, where you had a couple of those quick turnovers, and they were slow getting back. And that was when Coach Morin took that timeout after McKenzie hit the layup to cut the lead to 45-38. She took that timeout off the make. That was very similar to the timeout when I was there for the Murray State game. And I asked her about that in the press conference, and she was very direct about it. It's unacceptable. They didn't hustle back. So it was interesting from that standpoint. But I think this is, again, you don't like falling behind, but a good team, a veteran team, doesn't panic. And they didn't just try, and a veteran coach didn't panic. She didn't just try plugging in different lineups, changing the lineups. We've talked a lot about at times about trying to get more of the bench in the game, but tonight would have been one of those nights where somebody as a coach might panic and be like, I'm just going to clear the bench or I'm going to put 3 subs in and 2 start, that kind of, and just kind of, see if they could hunt a lineup. Coach Morin stayed with her, the ones that she trusts, and they finally found it. And it took that timeout. They came out of that timeout. They were down 45-38. They ran off the rest of the quarter, basically 17-2, I think it was. That right there, or I'm sorry, 17-6 in the quarter. That's where they found it, and they really held that pretty much throughout the fourth quarter. I do have some things I want to talk about a little bit later, kind of maybe, I'm not sure really, probably in a pivotal place. That's where I'll have it. There were some concerns at the end of the game too, but again, you found a way to get a win. You stay undefeated in the conference, and you're going to go to Iowa on Saturday with a chance to get the outright lead in the conference.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. So why don't we just go ahead and jump into pivotal plays? Where do you want to start? Maybe before the ball was even jumped?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that in a college game where Sydney Parrish was basically, as soon as the tip went up, the officials noticed she still had her earrings in. And so they stopped the play and forced her to go out. Now, that was kind of, to me, I'll take the break there, because in a high school game, that's a technical. Because as a coach, before the game, they ask you, are your players legally equipped? Well, earrings being in is not legally equipped. And so, but I don't think I've ever seen that in the college game with that. But no, I'm going to go. My first pivotal play here was kind of at the end of the first half, Kathy. And this is one of those that we've seen a little bit of here a few times on the season. They couldn't run the clock all the way down. The shot clock was going to end before the game clock, but Chloe takes a really, not quick, but she shoots, in my opinion, early. There was still about 7 seconds left on the shot clock, 11 seconds or so on the game clock, and she's shooting it early. In my opinion, you want to milk that down to 1 or 2 on the shot clock so you can get it as close to 0 as you can. You want to leave as little time as possible for the other team. She misses, Penn State's able to come back down the floor and they bank a 3. And so what could have been at worst a 2-point deficit ends up being a 5-point deficit at the half. And like I said, we've seen this a few times where they really haven't kind of managed clock or massaged clock at the end of quarter type situations. I just think that's something, but in that can be, especially at the end of a fourth quarter, end of a third quarter, those can be pivotal plays.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and we've seen that from Chloe before. I would say, it feels like about 94% of the time she has pretty good decision making. I have, little problems with most of the time in her, ability to get the ball where it needs to be, the passes. But tonight wasn't necessarily on point with what we've seen of her. And, we'll probably talk a little bit about, her 6 turnovers and the turnovers for the team, but she had 6 of them herself, which kind of talks to her decision making as well. And I agree, at the end of that first half, you really wanted to milk the clock, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about milking the clock later, but, run the clock down a little bit more. And instead, Penn State got that 3 to go up 39-34. Another interesting thing that happened then going into that halftime was, Coach Morin didn't bring the team out until 1 minute and 43 seconds left with the in between the at the halftime. So there was 1 minute 43 left before the team came out of the locker room, which was way longer than we saw Penn State staying on the floor, coming out and warming up. And so clearly they felt they had a lot to talk about. And I think they did, in that first half, their shooting was not there. As we talked about, they only shot 39%. The 3-point shooting was just not there tonight. They had 25% in the first half, had 8 turnovers, 7 of them in the first quarter. And, we're getting out rebounded 23-16 and getting outscored 30-18 in the points in the paint, all in the first half. And so I felt they had quite a few adjustments to really come out and make. And I didn't quite see them at the beginning of the first quarter, the third quarter. But I think after that timeout in the third quarter, like I mentioned in my banner moment, that's where we really saw them kind of flip a switch and turn back into the team we have been seeing for the most part of this season. So what other pivotal plays do you have, Jeff, that you want to talk on?
To me, the whole game turns basically coming out of that timeout, Kathy, because at 6 from the 6:14 mark till the 3:30 mark, so almost 3 full minutes, Sydney Parrish goes on her own personal 9-1 run that gives us a 47-46 lead. And I think we were tied a couple times after that, but we never trailed again after that. But that 9-1 run by Sydney, where she had 2 drives, which I thought were key. I thought that finally somebody got really aggressive in attacking them off the dribble. And then she nailed a 3. And then, and with that. So I thought Sydney's, kind of 3-minute stretch there was to me was the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly why I kind of picked it for my banner moment. I think without that spark, I don't know what happened to Sydney during that timeout, but whatever Coach Morin said to her in particular, I think was just the right thing to be saying, or whatever coach said it to her, because she came out like her hair was on fire. And, I thought without that play, I think we'd be having a very different show tonight. I thought Sydney by far was really the spark that we really needed coming in after that. So I think, one person we should talk about, and it's not necessarily a pivotal play, but one person we didn't see a whole lot from on the positive side tonight was Yarden Garzone. So Yarden ended up with 7 points, but she ended up only playing 28 minutes, which was definitely by far the least we've seen of all the starters tonight, but probably one of the least we've seen from Yarden tonight. So I'm not sure if she had an illness or what was going on, but it just didn't seem like the game was coming to her. She ended up with 3 fouls and 3 turnovers as well in those 28 minutes, and only shot 3 of 8 from the floor. But one thing she did have a couple of assists, and one late in the game with about 8 minutes to go was a really great pass to Mackenzie going down, who ended up making 2. And I think she was actually fouled on that as well. But that ended or started another tiny run that we had there in that beginning of that fourth quarter. But I don't think the game was quite there for Yarden. Either it just was maybe not good matchups for her, or like you said, maybe she had some kind of illness or something else was going on. So, but overall, I thought that was a really great pass from Yarden. So she responded pretty well, I thought, to, when she got in, she was at least putting up really great effort. And that was an example of a good play from Yarden tonight.
Yeah, and I'll go to again the kind of after that. Right after that, you have a defensive sequence at our end where Penn State has the ball, I should say, and from our defensive end where we get, they miss a shot, kind of a bunny. Then we partially block the putback, and then I believe it was Sarah Scalia who hustled for the rebound out of bounds because it was probably going to be off us, and she hustled down the rebound and saved it to a Hoosier, and then we come down the floor and made something happen. But I'm also going to point out here at 6:37, Sydney buries a big three, pushes the lead back up to 9 at 63-54. And then the next trip down the floor takes a charge from the Brigham girl who was, had some strength advantage on Sydney, and so Sydney stayed in there and took the charge. So I thought that was a key sequence.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think Sydney just left everything on the floor, and, maybe we'll end up talking about her a little bit later here in the show. So maybe we'll save that, but maybe let's talk a little bit, Jeff, about how they ended the fourth quarter, because I thought there were some key plays that, we talked a lot about after the third quarter timeout and the beginning of that, through that beginning of the fourth quarter. They just really had their best basketball of the night, but then they just seemed to get back into this kind of, fouling. It seemed like we were just fouling a lot to go down the end. And I thought one of the announcers said something along the lines of, the clock is your friend. The clock is your friend, or something along that line.
Repeat after me, workaholics. Yes. The clock is your friend. The exactly. Clock is your friend. Stop fouling and stopping the clock. It was not, I was frustrated as a former coach. Kathy, do you know how many times I had that same conversation with my own teams, though? It's like we'd practice those things and we'd still go out and I'd be like, I have to be in a timeout. The clock is your friend. Let it run. Giving up a layup there is not the worst thing. Now, in the college game, I'll say this. Once you get under a minute, the clock's going to stop. So there isn't an advantage. Whereas like in the high school game, the clock keeps running. So, hey, make them burn timeouts, or they're out timeouts. We'll take a few seconds off the clock, but stop fouling. And it was your veterans who were fouling.
Yes, it was.
Sydney,
it was
Mac, Sarah.
Sydney. Yep, yeah, absolutely.
And then they get a 10, and then they get a 10-second violation.
You took the words right out of my mouth. And what was that? It was like, oh, you got it here in the notes. 53 seconds to go. Yeah, 53 seconds to go. And we have a 10-second violation. So this is, again, we saw this a little bit, at least I felt we did, when we were playing Princeton down in Fort Myers, where we just kind of struggle a little bit getting into the flow when we were getting pressed with a really strong press like Penn State had tonight. And, not only did we have some trouble, obviously, with that 10-second violation, but we were close again on a couple of other plays of not being able to break it. But even once we do break it, I think it just takes us out of our offensive rhythm that we have trouble getting down to. So I was glad that Penn State didn't start, kind of pressing us until towards the end. So, but any other overarching thoughts or plays you want to talk on with this game?
No, but I wanted to make sure I got in the part about the clock is your friend.
Yes, absolutely. So that will become one of our mantras, I think, hopefully, for other. Yeah, true. Let me rephrase that. That'll become one of our mantras that we never have to say again. So, okay, Jeff. Well, with that, we've kind of started touching a little bit on some numbers. Like, why don't we dive into the team numbers and our notable numbers first? So why don't you go first and tell us about a number you would really like to key on tonight?
Second half, IU holds Penn State to 30% shooting after allowing them to shoot 53% in the first half. I just thought, again, we talked a little bit about this in the pivotal plays, kind of the defense got back to focus. There was a lot of the game tonight where you could make the argument they weren't very focused. There was just one of those nights. Again, it happens in a 30+ game season. You're going to have those nights in the course of the season. Like this is why in the NBA game where you watch people be like, how do you lose by 50 in an NBA game? Because they're in an 82 game schedule. There's just nights where you just don't have it. The other team does. But the good teams find a way to win even when it's not their great game. But I did think that they lacked some focus for a big chunk of the first half. But the defense, once the defense, I felt, Kathy, got locked in there after that timeout, I really felt pretty good about the way the game went, except for that last minute.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the other big kind of blemish for me on this game is the turnovers. We had 8 turnovers in the first half, and I thought they were, kind of cleaning that up. And then we ended up with 20. And the worst part, I think, for me was that we had 6 of those come from Chloe and 4 from Mackenzie. So for 10 of those 20 rebounds, so half of our turnovers. I am really struggling with my vocabulary tonight, but 10 of our 20 turnovers were from 2 of our more senior players that you wouldn't expect that from, especially Chloe. I can't remember, the last time we've ever talked about Chloe having more turnovers than assists, but she certainly had that tonight with 6 turnovers and only 4 assists. So those were, that was definitely a number that was, they were definitely sloppy with the ball tonight, I thought.
Yeah, and that's the only way you can say it. There was a lot of bad unforced turnovers. The 10-second count's an example of that we mentioned already. Yeah. That's an unforced turnover. That's not being aware. And in the college game, the shot clock's there for you to see. So, I mean, that's just not good court awareness. Yeah, Kathy, another one I'll go to. I think if you told me beforehand that we'd still win by 8, if we got outscored 46-38 in the paint, I thought there was no way we're winning.
Right.
But we did. We were -8 on points in the paint and still found a way to win.
Yeah. And I think a lot of those came from Brigham, and I think it would have been even worse if she wouldn't have gotten into foul trouble, personally. So, but I think Valaday actually herself, she ended up with 13 points, and she did a really nice job getting to the basket as well, which I think accounted for them. One number I do want to talk about, though, is again back to our field goal percentage. So it was just not a good field goal percentage night for us. So we shot 39 in the first half, but ended up shooting 46 in the second. And I think part of that was because we stopped taking, or at least I don't have numbers per se to back this up, but it felt like we didn't take as many 3-pointers and started driving the ball more. And they were a little more high efficiency shots that we were taking in that second half. But the shooting just wasn't there overall for us tonight. 49%. 42% and then 29% from 3. We were only 4 of 14 from 3-point. After we've been kind of watching this team light it up from outside the arc, they were really struggling. Sarah Scalia was only 1 of 5. Sydney hit 2 very key ones, but it was 2 of 6. And then Yarden was 1 of 2. And then Chloe airballed the one that she took. So it was definitely not a good 3-point shooting night or shooting overall. The thing with this team is that they find ways to overcome when one thing is not working for them that they can usually rely on. They find other ways to get it done. And that's what I really enjoy about this team and how well I think they're coached. What other numbers, Jeff, do you have for us?
As far as team numbers, Kathy, I'll just say the one I'll point out is I think it's something we're going to talk a lot about throughout the rest of the season, just based on the stats we see. But we finished even on the glass, and we finished even on offensive rebounds. It was 37-37 overall, and both teams had 10 offensive rebounds. So I'll call that a push if you're betting. But for me, that's a plus. If you're finishing, especially at Penn State, who was, if I remember right, was plus a little bit better than us on the glass. So to me, that's a win.
Yeah, 23-16 in the first half, they out-rebounded us. So ending up even, 37-37 in the rebounds, tells me, well, clearly we out-rebounded them in the second half when it counted. And we really cleaned up better on the defensive side. Offensive rebounds, I didn't write it down, but I think they had quite a few in that first half, but Penn State only ended up with 10 offensive rebounds. So I think our defensive rebounding intensity in particular really went up along with our defensive pressure in that second half. Any other team stats, Jeff, that you want to kind of touch on, or anything in particular with number wise? All right.
Nope.
Well, let's jump into game ball then. We did just kind of set the stage here. We have had Mackenzie Holmes with 5 of the game balls for the year, Sarah Scalia with 4, Yarden Garzone has had 3, and Sydney Parrish has had 1 game ball so far this year. And I think you have a number of ways you could probably go on this tonight, Jeff, but what did you ended up going with for your game ball?
So I don't think I'll disagree with you, Kathy. I'm not sure there's several ways to go here. I think there's only 2 ways you really could go here.
2,
and
yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Sydney Parrish because to me, without Sydney's 9-1 run of her own, I don't think this. I'm not saying we don't come back to win it, but I think it ends up being a much fiercer fight to the end in terms of maybe we scratch out a 2 or 3 point win. But Sydney got us the momentum kick started early in that third quarter, and you look at Sydney's stat line: 5 for 9 shooting overall. She was only 2 of 6 from beyond the arc, but that means she was 3 for 3 inside the arc. 8 of 10 at the free throw line. So 20 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, and 3 steals. And so, only had 1 turnover. So I went with her over McKenzie based mostly on the turnovers because Mac, again, had another night where she really struggled in the turnover column.
Yeah. Jeff, I meant, again, I'm struggling with my vocabulary tonight. I meant you could go a couple of ways, not several ways. But yeah, so you had McKenzie on the other side of that with 21 points on 10 of 16 shooting. But yeah, the big thing that stood out to me there as well is her 4 turnovers. And so for me, I put down Sydney for my game ball as well. So that is Sydney's second game ball, I believe, in a row for tonight. So she had it after the Nebraska game. And, before we move on to the Grace Berger hardest worker, I think Sydney has really played very well here of late. Kind of starting back with the stretch when we had her right against that Maine game, where we had 3 games in a row where we gave Sydney our hardest worker, and then she got it against Michigan, and then here Nebraska and Penn State the last 2 games she's gotten our game ball. And to me, I think that is going back to when we were previewing the season. I had said, I really feel that how Sydney goes is how this team is going to go, and I'm feeling that now that she has ratcheted up her play here in the last half or second half of the first half, the last 10 games or so, she's really ratcheted up her play, and it's showing in the team effort in total on the floor and the team results.
Well, it's really shown up in the last 3 games because realistically, she could have been the game ball for the last 3 games. I mean, Absolutely. That game against Michigan where she came out on fire and got had 17 or 18 points in the first quarter alone. Something like that, 14 points in the first quarter, with that. So, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And I think the only other negative tonight, the negative about Sydney tonight was she ended up with 4 fouls. And again, when Sydney's playing well, we can't afford for her to be on the bench because of foul trouble. A breather, a rest, that's fine. But I think you got to be able to keep it, you got to be able to keep her on the floor as much as possible. The other thing too here, Cass, before we move on to the hardest worker, mentioned Chloe Moore McNeil went down a little bit tonight and kind of, we think maybe twisted an ankle, whatever, got taped up, came back in. Be interesting to see how that feels tomorrow. Because generally with an ankle injury, a lot of times, especially if it's not one of those where you can barely walk as soon as it happens, if you can still put some pressure on, handle the pain, they tape it up, it's not too bad that night, adrenaline's flowing. It's the next morning when you kind of wake up and it's starting to swell on you or has swollen up on you. So I'll be interested to see how they treat her, because that's the things with modern training and, physical therapy that they can do down there. What they do tonight, would they put her in almost like an ice boot for part of the night, one of the, those sleeve type things on her ankle to try and keep the swelling down. But we obviously need her on Saturday at close to, if not 100%.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Well, cool. Well, congratulations to Sydney. Just really love to see her play. So let's go ahead and move on to the Grace Berger hardest worker. Again, the ticker is up there if you're watching on YouTube, either live or after the fact, but you can see the number for we've had so far. So as mentioned, Sydney is leading the way with 4. Mackenzie Holmes has 3. Chloe Moore McNeil, Lexi Bargesser both have 2. Lene Beaumont and Lily Meister each have 1. So Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and let you start again. So who did you vote for your Grace Berger hardest worker?
Again, I think you could have brought in Chloe here, as we talked about. She did not have a great ankle. And came back with the ankle. Did not have a great shooting night, but she didn't have a rebound at all. She, as you mentioned, she was negative on assist to turnover ratio for maybe the only time I can ever remember, 6 turnovers to 4 assists. So in this case, I'm going to go with Mackenzie here. Mackenzie to me becomes the logical choice for the hustle, because if Sydney isn't the game ball, which she is, but then it's Mackenzie. And I know they aren't necessarily one in the same award. It's not like a 1A, 1B award, but I thought Mackenzie made some really big plays, both at the defensive end and the offensive end in that fourth quarter. Sydney kind of got us jump started rolling at the, from the middle of the third quarter to the end of the third quarter. Mac kind of carried us throughout the rest of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. At first, I was going to say Chloe for her efforts to come back after that ankle. She really looked like she was in pain. They took her back, retaped her or taped her back up, and really liked it. But boy, it's really hard to have somebody with 6 turnovers. And some of the decisions that you had mentioned get the hardest worker. And so for me, Mackenzie is getting our Grace Berger Hardest Worker Award as well. So that takes the Mackenzie up to 4. And while we're talking to Mackenzie, we'll go ahead and talk about our MAC watch numbers. So we've been watching pretty closely Mackenzie moving up this year on the different leaderboards for career all times. So first we'll start with points. So she is in second place right now behind Tyra Buss Davidson now, but she has a total of 2,193 points. And so that puts her 171 points behind Tyra. So with the 14 regular season games left, that means she has to average just over 12 points per game. She's already in first place for field goals made, now by a whopping 65 field goals, in case you're wondering how far ahead she is of second. But the other thing that's interesting for Mackenzie tonight as well is that she has now moved up to 6th place on the all-time rebounding award. So she started out the year in 8th. She's now up to 6th. She needs 42 more rebounds this year to move into 5th place. And then she's still a bit behind on the blocks, although she did have 3 blocks tonight. She is a bit behind on what she needs to average there. So really looking good for Mackenzie, especially for the taking over first place, I think, right now. So she's been averaging here in her last 4 games, she has scored 93 points in those 4 games. So really on pace to take that over. But anything, Jeff, you want to say on Mackenzie before we move on to our next game?
Now just she just keeps racking up the numbers and moving up the list. Some of them a little slower than others, but it'll be interesting to see what they do, especially if it's a home game. When she breaks Tyra Buss, assuming she gets that point, will they stop the game? I'm kind of remembering a little bit. I think even under Bob Knight, I think they stopped the game when Calvert Chaney became the all-time scorer.
I think so too.
And, made a brief, kind of a brief announcement, gave him the ball, whatever it was. So, but it'll be interesting to see exactly how they handle that, because not every coach is the same, and not every player is the same in terms of, stopping the game, kind of stopping the flow. So it'll be interesting to see how they treat that when that happens, especially if it happens at home. So we'll see from there. But yeah, just again, in some cases quickly, and in some cases a little more slowly, but she just continues to move up those all-time lists.
Yeah, she's looking really good for it. So, well, let's talk about the upcoming game for our Indiana women Hoosiers. So I think we've all been anticipating this game since we had the schedule kind of come out and printed. So our upcoming game is at Iowa. It is this Saturday.
It should be Saturday.
Yes, Saturday, January 13th. That game is a late night, if you will, for a Saturday for women. They are on prime time, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, and they will be on National Fox Channel. So I saw during the men's game last week that they were really billing this already on Fox, and as well as their headline for their Saturday lineup, I think. And so this is just great to see in general for women's basketball, but it's really fantastic to see for our Indiana women's program. So I think a lot of people know about Iowa already, but let's go ahead and talk about them in depth. So Iowa is currently number 7 in the net. In terms of the all-time series, they do have this one pretty handily, which is not surprising. They have had a good history with their women program. They lead the all-time series 53-22. They have won 31 to 4 times in Iowa City. So Indiana's only beat Iowa 4 times in Iowa City. Our last matchup was last year on February 26th of 23. I was at that game and got to see a lovely Caitlin Clark buzzer beat us on a 3 and beat us 86-85. In the last 10 meetings, Iowa is leading that 6-4, including winning 4 of the last 5. So let me go into their schedule a little bit and their record, Jeff, and then I'll kick it over to you. So Iowa is coming in at 15-1. They are 4-0 over in Big Ten play. And is that game right now with Purdue over?
No,
it's 2 minutes. Essentially.
2 minutes to go. So they're going to improve to 16-1, 5-0 in the league. Yep. They're up 91-69.
Okay, so they're up 91-69, beating Purdue at Purdue right now. Their one loss that they had is to Kansas State, who is number 9 in the net. The interesting thing with that was that it was at home, but it was very early in the season, November 18th, and they won that 58-65. But on the flip side of that, they went back down to Florida as well, or over Thanksgiving. They were in Florida playing at the same time that Indiana was, and they beat Kansas State down there 77-70. So they got their revenge. The other notable teams they've defeated this year, early on in the season, they went to Charlotte. Both teams, them and Virginia Tech, who is 15 in the net, got paid to play in Charlotte, and Iowa won that 80-76. So that was a really good game and really hard fought by both teams, but Iowa came out on top of that. Iowa State, they beat them in Ames. Iowa State is currently number 44 in the net, and they beat them in Ames 67-58. And then Michigan State is number 14 in the net, and that was a really hard-fought game, but Iowa won that as well on another buzzer beater from Caitlin Clark, I think with 0.7 seconds or something left, and they beat Michigan State 76-73. So, yeah, why don't you go ahead, Jeff, and let's get into some of the statistics for the team and some individuals for Iowa.
Yeah, head coach Lisa Bluter in her 24th season at Iowa, her 40th season overall. She's 494 and 249, which is a 66% winning percentage at Iowa. She has 850 wins. This isn't counting the one tonight. I guess I could add that in. 69% overall. Obviously, they were the NCAA run-up last year. They have 2 regular season Big Ten titles under Lisa Bluter, 4 Big Ten tournament titles, including the last 2. They're going to be above this a little bit tonight. They're 91 points a game is second in the Big Ten. They give up 67 though, but part of that's pace of play. They get up and down. It's not going to be long, drawn out 25, 26 second possessions, at least when Iowa has the ball. From that standpoint. So that's 10th in the league. But again, part of that is the pace they play at. They're shooting 51% on field goals, 3rd in the league, 36% on threes, which is 6th. I would have thought maybe a little better, but again, they're going to shoot a lot of them because they shoot almost 27 threes a game. They shoot 76% at the line, which is 5th. Interesting, Kathy, that they're just under +1 on turnover margin. They turn it over 14 times a game, but they only force 15. And with the style they play, you would really think that would be a bigger number there on the turnover margin. They're +11 basically in rebounds, which is 1st in the league, and they average 14. I'm just going around. They average 15,000 a game, which is 1st in the league. Obviously we know who their leader is, Caitlin Clark.
Yeah. Real quick, Jeff.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a note while you're talking about attendance. The other interesting thing with Iowa, I think, is that not only did they sell out all of their home games with season ticket holders before the season even started, every one of their remaining away games have sold out. So, for example, that Purdue game tonight was sold out. The Indiana game against Iowa has already been noted as sold out. Ohio State is sold out. And I believe Ohio State even opened up their balcony, which they don't typically do for women's game, and sold out all of that. So when we are getting ready to talk about Caitlin Clark, it is worth noting that, she's done an amazing job as a player, but she also brings a lot of eyeballs to the game and a lot of attention.
And right now, to give you an example, Kathy, of that game in West Lafayette just ended, the crowd was basically giving a standing ovation to the winning team, which was Iowa. That was,
right. That was in Purdue.
Yeah, and that was in West Lafayette. So part of the problem Purdue had was that game only sold out 3 days ago. And that was mainly because Iowa fans found out there were tickets available to go watch. And it's not that long a drive, especially on the eastern edge side of Iowa. I imagine maybe 5 hours?
Yeah, can't even be that far. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but obviously we all know about Caitlin Clark. She's 1st in the league in scoring at 31 a game. She averages 7 rebounds, 7.6 assists, which is 1st in the league. 1.6 steals, 49% field goals, 40% from the arc, 80% at the line. She's the all-time leading scorer at Iowa. She's on pace to become the all-time leading scorer basically in NCAA women's history, National Player of the Year last year. So, we all know about Caitlin Clark, and what you got to try to do with Caitlin Clark is just as best limit what she does. Don't let her go out and get 40.
Right.
Keep her to her average or
in the 20s.
Yeah. Keep her at her average or keep her a little low. But again, you pointed this out in the Workaholics tonight, or somebody else did at one point tonight. She only had 26 points and they were still winning by 20, 23, something like that. So they've got some firepower. That gets me to our next one. Hannah Stuelke, 6'2", sophomore forward. She's averaging 14 a game, 7 rebounds a game, 66% field goals, which is second in the league. But she's only a 60% free throw shooter, and she was the Big Ten sixth person of the year last year. Kate Martin, 6-foot graduate guard, 12 points a game, almost 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 55% field goals, a 33% three-point shooter, but an 89% free throw shooter. The one that's interesting here, and I hope I'm not bringing Mojo here but Gabby Marshall, 5'9" graduate guard. And I put question marks on this, Kathy, in the run sheet, because you watch them play, and I watched it on the eye test. When I'm watching it, I'm thinking, well, Gabby Marshall's not playing that bad. Then I started looking at her stats. Her shooting numbers are all way down. She's a career 40-plus three-point percentage shooter. She's shooting 29% from 3 this year. And most of her shots are 3. So her overall field goal percentage is only 30% right now. And she's only shot 2 free throws. Coming into the Purdue game tonight, she only shot 2 free throws all year. So I'm like, well, I didn't think Marshall's playing that bad, but then you look, she's only averaging about 4 or 5 points a game, but yet they're winning. So it's like,
she doesn't need to score.
Right. But you would think she'd make shots.
Yeah. When you have somebody scoring 31 points with Caitlin Clark, 14 with Stuelke, and 12 with Kate Martin, I don't think she's out there for scoring. What I've noticed with Gabby Marshall is more on the defensive side. They tend to put her on the best guard on the other team. That's what I'm thinking is more of Gabby Marshall's role for them this year.
That's I'm glad you chimed in with that, because you get to see them a little bit more than I do with that. So, but yeah, I mean, we know what they are. There are no secrets in the league anyway, but there's definitely no secrets between these two teams.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think, the thing that we're going to obviously be watching and hoping for is Chloe's ankle to be back to some good health, so that she can hopefully slow Caitlin Clark down. And I know it sounds weird if you haven't watched women's basketball and somehow don't know about Caitlin Clark. I'm not quite sure where you're living, maybe under a rock, but just in case you don't know, slowing somebody down like Caitlin to only 20 points a game is really a great defensive effort. And it probably sounds weird with almost any other player we'd be going up against to slow them down to 20 points, but that's absolutely what we need to do with Caitlin Clark. But then you also have to make sure that our other players on Stuelke and Martin, or Gabby Marshall, or whoever it might be, especially Stuelke and Martin, are doing their job defensively as well, to not let them go off and take up the slack that maybe we can slow Caitlin down. The interesting thing for me, Jeff, is how they will handle Mackenzie Holmes. Like, we're talking a lot about how are we going to defend Iowa and how are we going to slow them down. But we're averaging 81 points per game as well, which is 5th in the league. So it's not like we're any slouch at putting up points. And Mackenzie's an All-American for a reason. And Hannah Stuelke, while she is a very good player, I'm not quite sure how she's going to be able to slow Mackenzie Holmes down. And so what I'm hoping for is that our shooting woes from tonight go away, because I think they're going to have to guard Mackenzie to have any hope of slowing her down. But what are your thoughts on the flip side of that, and how you think Iowa might try to guard us?
Well, I think they'll try and go with Stuelke and maybe double team her a little bit. I'm trying to remember, Kathy, you might be able to think of it off the top of your head. I didn't put her in the run sheet. They have a post player that, remember we talked with Kyle Huseman from Hawkeye Report back before the season started, that they kind of had some hopes who might end up being able to allow Stuelke to kind of move into that 4 spot. But the girl, I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but she's not putting up, huh?
It's O'Grady, right?
Yes.
I think that's who you're talking of. Yes.
Yeah. But she hasn't really put up big numbers for them.
No.
And so you may see a little bit more of her. I'm not sure Stuelke really is a great match for her, but then also Stuelke has a little bit of an opportunity to go out on the floor and maybe drag Mackenzie away from the rim too.
Yeah, that exactly. So the one thing I do my concern back to, again, talking about how do we defend them, is with Hannah Stolke. She's got some really fast feet, and she looks to be just maybe a little bit more athletic than Mackenzie might be. And so how does Mackenzie, again, I'm assuming Mackenzie's going to be guarding Stolke down there. How do we handle her as well? Because obviously we're going to have all of Chloe's attention on, or whoever's in the game at that point, on Caitlin Clark. So will Mackenzie be able to guard her as well? Because they're just very different kind of post players. Hannah is a little bit more, I don't know how to say this well, but she's a little more quick, I think. But I think Mackenzie's got much better IQ and footwork, which is not surprising. Hannah is only a sophomore. So right. I think that matchup is very intriguing to me, and I'll be curious to see how we do with that. But what are your keys to this game, Jeff, for us?
Oh, I was getting ready to say, if you were going to throw it back to me, I think you got to have we need the prime Sarah Scalia. Sarah had 11 points tonight. She had 6 rebounds, but didn't you feel like there were times she just kind of blended in or just kind of faded away tonight?
Say that one more time. Sorry.
Didn't you just feel like there were times tonight where Sarah kind of faded away? Yeah. Wasn't really, Sarah. You really didn't know she was out there. And we can't have that Saturday. You're going to go into probably the most, even more so than Stanford was back before Thanksgiving. This is going to be the most hostile environment you're going to go into maybe all season. And what you really need is shooting to kind of quiet a crowd down. And so you need Sydney, and we talked about her already, and being on a little bit of a roll. But we need Sarah Scalia that played Michigan, played Nebraska. We need that kind of production. I'm not saying ever, because Sarah plays hard. That's never been a question for me. But we need production.
Even when her shot wasn't coming tonight, I thought she had great effort on her part, and was still making some good plays. So so that is one of my keys to the game is our shooting, which I kind of mentioned. We cannot think that we're going to rely completely on Mac to be able to keep up with them. Question for you, Jeff. Do you, as a Coach Morin, do you try to slow Iowa down? Because we know they play probably a little faster pace than we do. Or do you just try to keep up with them and try to slow Caitlin Clark down and then see what happens?
I'm not sure you want to play 100 to 100 with them, but right. I'm not sure Coach Morin wants to, we had this argument a couple years ago when we first started the show, way back when we were doing like episode 7, 8, 9, it seems like right. about what's the way to beat Iowa? Is it to try and slow them down, or is it to try and, run with them? And a couple years ago, that didn't work for us. Remember, both games, both in Bloomington and Iowa City, we got behind big, made big runs in the fourth quarter to make them close, but they were 95, 80 type, 85 type games, 91, 85, 96, 91 type games. Last year, both games, the one in Bloomington, one in Iowa City, both in the mid 80s, and IU split, and realistically could have been 2-0. So I think if you keep the game in the 80s, the high 70s, low 80s, but I just can't imagine Terry Morin's going to try and make it a 65-60 game. I don't see that.
I don't think that they can. And so, yes. And when I, say slow them down, what is their team averaging?
Don't give them up.
90 points per game. Yeah. Don't keep them in, like, I was thinking the same thing, Jeff, mid upper 70s. If we keep it in that game, I think in that range, I think this is a game we can win. Let's talk about rebounding.
Yeah. Go.
Yeah. So great minds sometimes do think a lot. So again, this was really showing up in the first half of tonight's game, where rebounding was, I thought, hurting us, and especially on the defensive end. They have to find a way to come out from the beginning of this game and have that defensive and rebounding intensity, because it's going to do absolutely no good if you keep Caitlin Clark from, making her 3-pointers from the logo or whatever range she wants to shoot it from, and other people shoot and miss, if we just let them have second chance points. And so I think the defensive rebounding is, if not second, it's really close to tied, actually, with being able to make some shots on our end.
And you have to keep from fouling them. You cannot you cannot have foul trouble. And a lot of times fouls come on second and third opportunities. Cleaning off the glass, but you can't get in foul trouble, and you can't be putting them at the line for free throws, midway through a quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to talk about with that matchup?
Nope.
Okay. So I think we've talked enough about the numbers. So real
Yep.
quick on just games to watch that happened around the Big Ten, just to kind of update. We talked about Iowa beating Purdue at Purdue 96-71. On Sunday, Wisconsin went into Illinois and beat them 67-61, which is a surprise. I didn't get to watch any of that game. But again, Illinois, we were thinking we're going to be up in the top half. And what have they won? One Big Ten game, Jeff?
If they have, I thought it was 0, but I might have missed one yesterday. But right now, Kathy, is Illinois the most disappointing team in the league?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is now their second home loss that we know of. You know, they got blown out by Michigan, and then having a Wisconsin team who's, you know, candidly not one of the top half of the league teams, and probably more towards the middle bottom half, come in and beat them at home. I thought was really disappointing. And then the other surprising to me was yesterday, Minnesota goes into Michigan and beats them 82-66. And it's back to, well, maybe Minnesota's for real. But we don't really know exactly what we're getting with Michigan yet either. But that to me was a telltale sign. And I'll be candid, I didn't watch any of that game. But having such a big win by 16 points at Michigan, to me, tells me more Minnesota's probably for real, and Michigan's probably going to be having an off year. Any thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I'll say it a little bit differently, but I can't, you know, Minnesota's a little more contender than we thought. And I think Michigan is a little more pretender than we might have thought based on the first couple of games, you know, with the way they went into Illinois. And again, I think that's why I go back to, you look at Illinois, they got blown out at home by Michigan back in the early part of December. And then they lose at home to Wisconsin, and who, like you said, is at best bottom third of the league, if not in the, you know, the bottom three. And so I'm not sure what's going on at Illinois. I'll comment on that one too a little bit, Kathy. I was at that game with Indiana, and they played about the way you think they can play. And you can chalk up a lot of their losses or close games, but that also tells me something's missing, whether it's in, you know, it's in primarily, I would assume it's in the locker room. There's a connection that's missing. They're not, there's that was there last year when they were the hunter. They kind of liked that idea. I think this year, I think they're getting a little bit more of the hunted, and they're not responding very well. But there's something that's, because like I said, we thought they were a possible top 4 team in the league.
Right.
And here they are right now. They haven't won a game in the league. And so something's missing, something in, you know, I hate to say it that way, but it just seems like there's something going on over there that we don't know about, which for obvious reasons, but there's just something off kilter.
Yes, they are. I double checked or fact checked us. They are 0-3. So they're second to last. Only Rutgers is behind them at 0-4. So they're, you know, for all intents and purposes, last. And it's surprising with Illinois because they have a good chunk of their productivity back this year. I think they had one of the top 5 in the nation back in terms of offensive productivity. So, well, Jeff, why don't we go ahead and wrap things up here a little bit? What are your final thoughts on tonight's win over Penn State? And here we are heading into a huge game on Saturday against Iowa.
Huge game. You get a chance I'll talk about the Saturday game first. You get a chance to get a leg up in the league, and you win a game on the road against the other top contender right now. It's going to be a tough win. I'll be honest, go back to the preseason predictions. I want us to win, but this was a game I had chalked up as a loss going in. So it'll be more, if we lose, I'll be looking more along the line of how we play. And, you know, will it be more, is it Stanford? Then that's not a good thing. Is it losing, you know, a close game on the road to the other best team in the league? Yeah, I can live with that. But tonight, you know, when we kind of texted about this, Kathy, the more as I kind of got into the first half, the more it really hit me. This was a trap game. It really was, because everybody was talking about the way they'd played the last 2 games, how well they'd shot the 3, how well Sydney and Mack had played, especially even Sarah. And everybody was looking at Penn State coming in with just the 1 league win, but I'm sure they didn't know for sure, but McKenna Marissa playing night. By the way, kudos to get McKenna Marissa back on the floor. I'm glad she was. Yes, glad to see that. Glad she wasn't healthy for us. You know, I'm glad, you know, take a break. But, at that point, McKenna had missed, she had missed a month of the season. So I think they got caught kind of thinking at home, Penn State's coming in, only got one league win. But we got Iowa on Saturday. Let's think about it, and so it really was kind of your classic trap game scenario. And luckily they were able, as a veteran team, to find a way to dig themselves out of a hole in the third quarter.
Yeah, I agree. So my final thoughts are very much similar to that, Jeff. I think we definitely were thinking a lot about our win over Nebraska and looking too much ahead for Iowa. I am happy to see McKenna Marissa for Penn State coming back. I think that will that's really going to bolster them if she can stay healthy then the rest of the year. We saw that here tonight where, they have a good team. They took Ohio State with Marissa down to overtime. So don't sleep on Penn State either. There's still a lot of basketball to be played. So I'm excited to see what we do going into Iowa City. So that is my final thought. All right, so I'll wrap us up here quickly because we're closing in on an hour, which is pretty long for Jeff and I, especially by ourselves. But I do want to talk again. Our 100th episode is coming up on January 21st. It is Sunday. It is after the Purdue game at Purdue. We are officially announcing now we are planning to do a celebration of that, and thanks to Home Field. Home Field Apparel is going to be letting us give away a choice of anything you want if you are chosen the winner. So how are you going to be the winner? So first of all, you have to come and watch our live show on YouTube. And then you need to go ahead and chat with us in the live Workaholics chat. However, it has to be something specific related to the game or to something we're talking about on the show. So you can't just come in, say hi, and leave, because then at the end of the show, you have to be present to win. And then we'll do a random drawing of anybody that chatted with us in the Workaholics. My husband, thanks, Sean. He's in the other room right now. So thanks to Sean, he is a controller and accountant. So he's very good at this type of stuff. He will keep track of everyone and do a random drawing, and we'll announce the winner at the end of that episode. So keep that on your calendar. Again, that is January 21st.
Hey, so Sean, like those guys that they bring out at like the Oscars, here's the accountants who,
Yes. He's going to audit the results for us. So thanks to Sean for that. And I've already told him he's not eligible, so he can't win. Jeff and I can't win either, obviously either, but hopefully all of you mark your calendar, January 21st. But before that, we do have 2 other episodes, and we will be coming live with you on Saturday the 13th, right after the Iowa game. It will be a little bit later, so hopefully you don't have too many Saturday plans out there. The game again tips at 8 Eastern, 7 Central. So we'll be on around 10 Eastern, 9 Central. Assembly Call will be on tomorrow night, their 1000th episode. So congratulations to the guy over on Assembly Call. And if you want to see us do the live show live, hopefully again on that January 21st date, be part of the live chat. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@backhome-network. You can be part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.substack.com. Special thanks to John Ringer of Riggs Design for designing our logos. Big thank you to Bob Thompson for the music you heard. But most of all, thank you all for being here live or listening after the fact. We appreciate you all and love talking with you. And we'll be back with you to talk hoops again on Saturday night. But until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers. All right.
Good show. Thanks everybody on the Workaholics. Really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for being here. Yeah, very lively group, a lot of banter back and forth, and hopefully everyone was staying nice to each other. So just remember that everyone's entitled to your opinions, and everyone's respected here. So appreciate everyone being with us, and hopefully we'll see quite a crowd again on Sunday, or on Saturday rather, and then again on the last 2
Wednesday
leading up to our 100th episode. So really exciting, Jeff. I can't believe that we've been able to make it that long, and people pretend they want to listen to us, I guess.
Yeah, we got people coming in to listen to us. So,
So
great.
it's a lot of fun.
We had 60 some people tonight after a game that was on BTN Plus. So
We did.
hopefully after a Fox game,
know,
when
I
hopefully
know.
a win, if we're lucky, you know, we get a good crowd in here after. But we're always appreciative of the crowd that's here. You know, we got certain people, Quang, Eagle Eye, Steve, DC General. You know, there's a lot of you guys. We're not trying to just omit anybody, but you know, who've been here for a long time with us on the Workaholic. So, you know, we appreciate you guys being here night in and night out. So
yeah.
So hey, we're gonna get out of here because Kathy, you got to work a little bit.
And I got to defend Iowa. Yep, a little bit. Yes, I do. So I'll let you go. But before I leave and we officially sign off, DC General, I'm going to defend Iowa, the state. At least the Des Moines area is actually quite a lovely place to work. Ignoring the weather, we got 11 inches of snow yesterday and are expecting 3 more tonight and another 5 to 10 on Friday. But ignoring the weather, actually Des Moines is a really great place to live. And if you're ever in this area, I'd love to show it off to you. So got to defend my home right now. So. All right.
Everybody, take care.
Jeff,
we'll talk to you
let's call it a night.
Yep. We'll talk to you Saturday night.
Yep. Take care. Bye-bye.